Santa Fe can make a better decision for you than you can for yourself. And people believe it. They believe it. So, how do we change that? We need to talk about what kind of choices you're not making. There, I saw some homeschoolers here. Would you raise your hands again? I thought I saw some. Thank you. Thank you. That's a choice. You know, our educational system is failing. You have a choice. But if you talk to most people, they think they're stuck. What are we thinking? If you think that only the government can give you a job, what are you thinking? Are we really willing to buy off on what we think is a safe pension when in fact you're going to have a substandard living? That is what we have agreed to. It's time to change our thinking. We have been held hostage in this state, and the most egregious way that we are held hostage is the temptation of a 3-to-1 federal match, and we buy it every time. I believe that when we stand up and say, we can make better decisions for ourselves than federal government, we don't need your money, we will be better off.
Two things. One, I think the role of state government is really to get out of people's way. If you're in small business, state government is always a headache. I think state government needs to be provide essential services, just like Alan said, and I think state government needs to be able to provide choice to those people who are trying to educate their kids. We don't have choice today. We have some, but we don't have very much. We have a state government which attempts to control every portion of our lives, and I think what Janice is referring to in Santa Fe, among some of her colleagues, are people who believe state government should provide a chicken in every pot and a car in every driveway, and that's garbage. I also believe that state government ought to promote work rather than subsidize it. All of us here work for a living, and when we're out of work, times are tough, and yet we have an administration that doesn't seem to recognize that and says, hey, come on, get a job with the state, we'll tax everybody else. I think that's absolutely inappropriate. And finally, I think one of the roles of state government is to tell the federal government to get out of our hair. You think back to 1994 when we had a wave of Republican governors winning all across the country. I think at one point we had 34 Republican governors. You had a very strong movement among those governors to go to Washington and tell Bill Clinton to leave us alone. And right now, we don't have that in this country. And I think in 2010, when we elect Republican governors around the country, and those Republican governors stand together and go to Washington and tell the Obama administration no, we will have far more power than we have today.
I think part of what Doug was referring to is the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And the 10th Amendment has been ignored for a long time, and it's been sort of trampled by the federal government, but it is an essential part of the Bill of Rights. And what it does is it reserves to the states or to the people anything that is not specifically granted to the federal government. And the grants to the federal government are limited, and the federal government continues to ignore that. The federal Congress ignores that, and we have federal involvement at all levels of New Mexico, particularly a state like ours where the federal government owns 60 or 70% of the land and more of that, of the minerals and other reserves. So we need to enforce the 10th Amendment as a state. We need to join with other states who will join with us as a state, or do it on our own, whatever it takes. And there has been a trend of pushback. There's been successes, and we need to build upon those successes so the state can run the state, not the federal government. And when the state runs the state provides essential services, as other candidates have explained. And I would just add, because I don't want to be redundant, when the state provides essential services, They need to provide them in a fair, predictable, and quality manner. We have not seen that in this administration. We have not valued quality, predictability, or fairness. And all of those are what businesses look for when they want to grow, when they want to relocate, what families look for when they want to stay here. So we need a limited but fair, effective, and quality state government.
Very specifically, the 10th Amendment reads, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people." And unfortunately, our current administration has forgotten that last phrase, "or to the people." They have stopped listening to the people who have said they must stop the crazy spending, they must stop the reckless spending and the waste and fraud that is lining their pockets. We have to make a priority list of what we want from our government. Do we want a better educational system? Is that something that we're asking and demanding of our government, and not having 46% of our children not graduating in 4 years? Are we demanding from our government the ability for people to choose for their own families, whether they stay in that failing school, whether they go to a charter school, whether they are homeschooled, and whether their tax dollars are going to follow the child instead of those tax dollars staying in the school that is failing? Those tax dollars follow the child. You deserve the tax credit. It's your money that is paying for the educational system, and we shouldn't be trapping those children in those failing schools. And so, again, we have to remember that it is for to the people who decide what is best for their children and their education. We have to make sure to provide the good roads. We have to make sure that we provide a system that makes our state competitive for those jobs to come to New Mexico and stay in New Mexico. We have to create the environment that the people then decide how they're going to build jobs, create jobs, and make sure that the tax dollar stays in your pocket and not in Bill Richardson and Diane Denish's pocket.
Next question, please. And this one will, Ms. Jones will start the answering process.
My name is Peter Penny. I'm retired military, live in Clovis, Gubernatorial. Each year I'm very curious at what goes on in Santa Fe and why they have to have a special session to do the budget. Why isn't the budget the very first thing that's accomplished at the legislative session instead of a lot of petty other things that don't mean anything?
The direct answer is, I'm not your governor, Bill Richardson is. And that's the truth. You know, the governor sets the agenda. This last session, and I can attest to it because Representative Cook and I just lived through this, we warned them. We said, don't throw a bunch of stuff in it. What did they throw in there? Domestic partnerships. An ethics commission that actually, if any of you blew the whistle, would cost you more money if you talked to your spouse. A lobbyist bill that did nothing in terms of healing corruption, and a myriad of other things, including same-day voter registration, none of which had anything to do with the budget, and everything to do with distracting and taking the focus off of what was done. But the real truth, the real story, the governor didn't have a budget. That's the truth. It is the governor's responsibility to make sure that there is a proposed budget. You cannot do this in secret, and you cannot do this without talking to everybody, not only the citizens, but also both houses of the legislature. Any good budget is a collaboration. And a budget, let me remind you, this isn't the Democrat version that is in Santa Fe today. A budget is the ceiling. That's what you work to. That isn't the baseline, and so you spend over it. We're having a little trouble up there just figuring out what a budget is.